Akhenaten, the cursed pharaoh and the bankruptcy of an empire. Welcome to the archives of dark records. Today, we explore a story of betrayal, fanaticism, and financial collapse. This is the story of a man who tried to erase 2,000 years of history to become the sole master of the world. Akhenaten was not a pharaoh like the others. He was either a visionary or a madman. He took a nation at the height of its glory and led it to the brink of the abyss. To understand his fall, we must look beyond the temples and follow the flow of gold and power. For centuries, Egypt was ruled by an iron alliance, the pharaoh on the throne and the priests of Ammon in the temples. These priests were the true bankers of the empire. They owned vast lands and thousands of slaves. Their wealth rivaled that of the crown. Every offering made to the gods was a disguised tax that enriched the clergy. But one day, a new king ascended the throne of Thebes, Amenhotep IV, the man who would become The young king saw the power of the priests as a direct threat. He decided to break their financial monopoly by changing gods. He declared that only Aton, the sun disk, deserved to be worshipped. This was not just a religious reform. It was a massive seizure of assets. By closing the ancient temples, the pharaoh confiscated the gold, lands, and grain silos of the Ammon clergy. It was the largest transfer of wealth in ancient history. To mock this new era, Akhenaten did the unthinkable. He abandoned Thebes, the ancestral capital. He ordered the construction of a new city in the middle of the desert, the horizon of Aten. This project was an unprecedented financial drain. Thousands of workers were forcibly moved to build palaces and open-air temples in record time. The logistics required to feed an entire city in a barren desert was an economic madness. The imperial administration began to collapse under the weight of this ambition. Officials and ministers, once loyal, were forced to choose sides. Some followed the king out of fear, others out of opportunism. But in the shadows, resistance was organizing. The deposed priests used their secret networks to sabotage the economy. They encouraged farmers to hide harvests and stop paying taxes to the new god. International trade, a pillar of Egyptian wealth, began to suffer. Akhenaten was so obsessed with his new religion that he neglected foreign policy. The Amarna archives contain desperate letters from allied kings. They begged Egypt to send military aid and gold to fight the Hittites, but the pharaoh did not answer. He spent his days composing hymns to the sun while his allies were being slaughtered. This negligence led to the loss of copper and silver mines in Syria. The trade routes to the south, towards the gold mines of Nubia, became dangerous. The flow of precious metals to the royal treasury dried up. To compensate, Akhenaten increased tax pressure on his own people. Royal scribes traveled the country to seize every grain of wheat. Famine began to strike the countryside while the granaries of the new capital overflowed. Discontent spread to the army. The generals saw the empire shrinking like a piece of leather. They no longer had the means to pay their mercenaries. Egypt was losing its superpower status. In the streets of the new city, the atmosphere was heavy. People were starving while the pharaoh and his queen Nefertiti were depicted in luxury. The contrast between the royal image and the social reality was explosive. Then came the family drama. Akhenaten lost several of his daughters, and perhaps even his queen. The pharaoh isolated himself further in his stone palace. The city of Amarna became a golden cage. Without a strong male heir by his side, the future of the dynasty was uncertain. Paranoia gripped the court. Ministers began to plot for the return of the old order. They knew that the king's death would mark the end of this radical experiment. Upon Akhenaten's death, the system collapsed instantly. His successor, the young Tutankhamun, was forced by generals and priests to restore the old cult. The city of Amarna was abandoned to the sands. An attempt was made to erase Akhenaten's name from all monuments. He became the enemy of Akhenaten. The confiscated wealth was returned to the temples of Ammon. Economy had to be rebuilt on the ruins of a decade of chaos. But the financial trauma was deep. Egypt never regained a full stability from the previous era. Confidence in the divine power of the pharaoh had been shaken. The priests returned more powerful and greedier than before. They now knew they could bring down a king if they controlled the purse strings. It was the beginning of a slow decline that would lead Egypt to foreign domination centuries later. Akhenaten's story teaches us that a vision, however spiritual, cannot survive without a solid economic base. By ignoring the realities of trade, diplomacy, and taxation, the pharaoh doomed his own dream. Egypt's wealth was its blood, and Akhenaten tried to change the blood type of an entire nation. The result was a hemorrhage that almost killed the most powerful empire of antiquity. Behind the strange faces and elongated bodies of Amarna art lies a brutal economic truth. The revolution was not just for a god, but for total control of national wealth. By centralizing all capital in his hands, Akhenaten created a breaking point. His failure is a lesson for all leaders. Absolute power is an illusion if it does not rest on the consent and prosperity of those who finance it. Today, Amarna is nothing more than a field of ruins in the desert. The papyri found there tell a story of unpaid bills and imperial debts. The Dark Records archives show that money is the true engine of history, even in the time of gods. Every monument has a price, and every silence of a king has a consequence on the market. Akhenaten's shadow still hangs over Egypt, reminding us that eternity cannot be bought on credit. We end this chapter with a question. If you were Akhenaten's finance minister, would you have tried to save the empire or hasten its fall to return to the old system? The choice between faith and currency is a dilemma that spans the ages. History repeats itself, and the ledgers of the past are the prophecies of our future. The end of an empire always begins with a red number in the great book of fate.